Hello! In this video we're going to take a look at 6th grade structure and function of the body. We'll be focusing on the GLEs that speak to 6th grade specifically as it relates to health. And mainly we're going to take a look at body systems. Body systems are something, organization of either bones or muscles or tissues or glands or some combination of that does something for your body. Without a particular body system, your body wouldn't be able to function normally. For example, the skeletal system incorporates all of your bones. Well, if you didn't have your skeletal system, you would just kind of be a big mass of tissues and skin and things like that. You need your skeletal system to give your body form and to protect your organs. So let's take a look at some different body systems. The first one we're going to take a look at is the muscular system. The muscular system's primary job is to allow your body to move. It's also made up of the heart and in some ways the organs, which we'll talk about in just a second. What we need to focus on is that there are 3 types of muscle tissues. Cardiac is one kind. You can probably guess cardiac deals with the heart. Your heart muscle is your cardiac muscle. This is one type of muscle tissue. Another is skeletal. Skeletal muscle is any muscle that allows your skeletal system to move. So any muscle that's connected to bone. So for example, your biceps allow your forearm to move up when it contracts. That's skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle relates to what you might find in tissue. Relating to organs. That's smooth muscle. The other thing we want to take a look at as it relates to the muscular system are 2 types of muscles. And there are 2. One is involuntary muscles. The other is voluntary muscles. Involuntary muscles function without you thinking about it. Examples of this are your heart beating, blinking. These things happen without you making a conscious choice to make them happen. Voluntary muscles are muscles that you can control, on the other hand. Voluntary muscles are, again, like your bicep. If you choose to raise your forearm, you would contract your bicep. You have complete control over this, and that's how you would move your skeletal system using voluntary muscles. So involuntary muscles happen without your conscious thought. Voluntary muscles respond to your conscious thought. Next system we want to take a look at is the skeletal system. And specifically when we talk about the skeletal system, we're looking at 4 main types of joints. There are several different kinds of joints. We're going to take a look at 4 of them. The first one is a ball and socket joint. Ball and socket joint. An example of this is your shoulder. Your arm is allowed to have pretty much a free range of motion. I can move it up, down, left, right, circular, whatever it is. It's because of this ball in the socket type of joint that allows for that full free range of motion. Another type of joint is a gliding joint. In this type of joint, bones are allowed to move across each other or glide across each other, kind of like how an elliptical glides with this kind of joint. These kinds of joints are found in the hand and feet. The next type of joint we're going to look at is the hinge joint. The hinge joint. It functions a lot like a door hinge does. That's why it's called a hinge joint, as you can see in this picture. It allows for free range of motion forward and backward, or in one direction. My leg is a really good example of this. My knee is a hinge joint. I can move the bottom part of my leg forward and backward very easily, but I can't move it left or right. I also can't move it, say for example, move my foot up and touch it to, say, the top of my leg. I can't do that. It limits range of motion but allows for movement in one direction. That's a hinge joint. Next is a pivot joint. In this example, this diagram, the head is allowed to move to the left and to the right. It's rotating. Specifically, it's rotating. It's pivoting. If you think of a basketball, a pivot foot in basketball, as long as I have that foot planted, I can move in any direction I want, but I can't move in a direction away from that pivot point. That's kind of how a pivot joint works. Okay, the next system we're going to take a look at is the respiratory system. The respiratory system. Respiratory specifically refers to the exchange of air or gases in the air with your body, and then the expulsion of the unwanted gases. So let's take a look at how that process works. There are two kinds of respiration. There are external and internal respiration. External respiration speaks specifically to the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and the air in the lungs. So when I breathe in, I'm taking air in, and my lungs are filtering the oxygen out and then preparing to expel the carbon dioxide. Interesting note, if you ever give CPR and you do rescue breaths, the air that you're breathing out only actually has about 7% oxygen in it, which is why it's not the best way to try to provide oxygen to an unconscious victim, because there's just not a lot there in the first place. Just kind of as a side note. Internal respiration, on the other hand, refers to the exchange of gases between the blood and the cells in the body. So once we have that oxygen in our lungs, how does it get exchanged and carried into cells, which then my circulatory system can take to the rest of the body? Let's take a look at that process. To do this, there are two different parts of the lungs that achieve this. The bronchi, which are the main opening through which air enters the lungs. So air doesn't kind of just come into the lungs in a random system. It'll actually enter these bronchi, and that's where the process of gas exchange occurs, along with alveoli. Alveoli are tiny air sacs where carbon dioxide is exchanged with oxygen. So this is actually where that process happens. Alveoli, this is another reason why you don't want to smoke, because if you smoke, you're putting tar and all that kind of stuff on this alveoli, which makes it more difficult, and the bronchi for that matter, which makes it more difficult to get oxygen into the lungs and then for the cellular change to take place. So again, the bronchi are the way in which air enters the lungs, and alveoli allow for the exchange of gases. So we're getting the oxygen and expelling the carbon dioxide. Okay, for our focus in 6th grade with the GLEs, we want to take a look at how the respiratory and the circulatory systems work together. Circulatory systems basically refers to the way in which blood is pumped or circulates through your body. This is done by the heart and arteries and that system. The way these two work together is the respiratory system brings in oxygen, which is then pumped, oxygen-rich blood, which is then pumped through the body by the circulatory system. The carbon dioxide is then scrubbed also by the lungs. So basically the easiest way to think of this is the circulatory system is carrying the product, the oxygen, of the respiratory system that's created by the respiratory system through the rest of the body. It's also then exchanging gases back out of the body through the respiratory system. So basically the circulatory system carries the product of the respiratory system, which is oxygen and the exchange of gases. Next, let's take a look at the nervous system. The nervous system is what allows you to think and to sense things. So if you sense cold, if you sense warmth, that's being delivered through nerves. If you get a cut and it hurts, that's from nerves. So let's take a look at the nervous system. Our main focus is that to understand there are two main parts to the nervous system, and that's the central nervous system, or you might hear it referred to a lot as the CNS, and this specifically refers to the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord. The brain is obviously the control center of the body. It's where messages get sent to and from that tell your body to do different things, or that different things are happening to you, or that you need to put a jacket on, or you can wear shorts today, or whatever it might be. The spinal cord and the brain are the two main parts of the central nervous system. The other part of the nervous system is the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. As you can see in this diagram, the brain and the spinal cord are pink. So basically, the peripheral nervous system refers to everything else outside of the brain and spinal cord that allows you to feel or sense. So for example, if I were to take my hand and move it on my forearm, I could feel that something's touching my forearm and that my fingers happen to be cold. All that is that information is gathered by the peripheral nervous system and then sent to the central nervous system, to the brain. So another way to think of it is the peripheral nervous system gathers the information and sends it to the brain. So two parts of the nervous system. One is the central nervous system, includes the brain and spinal cord. The other is the peripheral nervous system that includes the nerves that connect the central nervous system to all the parts of the body. So another thing we want to look at is how environment affects learning. This comes within the nervous system. What works better for you? Everybody kind of works differently, but obviously if we've got our friends and we're studying late and we're listening to music and we're texting and we're watching television, whatever else might be going on, and we're trying to learn that lesson that we need to study for that test or whatever it is that we may need for the next day, it's going to be very difficult because we have sensory overload. Our brain is trying to take in too much information and it has a more difficult time processing and learning the things that you're trying to study. So it's very important to be aware of how your environment affects learning. Okay, the next system we want to take a look at is the digestive system. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the different organs in the digestive system and what their functions are. From a broad standpoint, the digestive system is a process by which your body takes in nutrients, food, water, and turns that into something that your body can use. I mean, we all know that our body needs certain vitamins, certain minerals, but how do we get from an apple into vitamin C? For example, processing vitamin C. Well, this is going to take a look at how that process occurs. The tongue. We might not think of this as digestive system, but it is kind of the first part of it, along with the teeth. It creates saliva that softens and breaks down food. You guys know when you're about to bite into something that that tasty apple, if you will, your mouth begins to salivate, and these juices break down that food and help in the overall digestive process. Next part we want to take a look at, and it's boxed in here in the red, is the esophagus. And it's a tube that forces food down into the stomach in a process called peristalsis. So what will happen is you'll swallow the food. The esophagus will have the function of moving, actively moving that food down into the stomach so it can be broken down even more. That's your esophagus. The next organ is the stomach. And this is where a lot of the food breakdown occurs. Food's broken down by gastric juices, and it's also a temporary storage area as your body processes the different food that you've eaten. Just a note, these juices are very, very powerful. We have stomach lining in our stomach that prevents the juices from obviously hurting our stomach. But if you were to use these juices on, like, say, metal, it could actually dissolve metal. So they're very powerful. So that's what the process. That's what the function of the stomach is. The next one is the small intestine. This is actually kind of interesting. I mentioned, how do you get the nutrients out of food? Well, it happens in the small intestine. This is the organ where nutrients are separated from food and they enter the bloodstream. So if you're getting vitamin C from an orange, this is where that process is actually going to happen in the small intestine. The vitamin C will be extracted from what is processed by the stomach into the small intestine, and that vitamin C will then be processed into the bloodstream, and you'll receive the benefits from it, which is more energy. Kind of cool. This is actually where that occurs, in the small intestine. Next is the liver. The liver helps to break down fats. It creates bile, which is kind of the beginning of the byproduct for the excretory system. The liver also scrubs or gets rid of any toxins like ammonia, and that is the function of the liver. Next is a gallbladder. The gallbladder stores bile and releases it into the small intestine as needed. So if your body's breaking down bile, it will do so, be stored in the gallbladder, and then as the small intestine is ready for more bile, the gallbladder will release that. And finally, we're going to take a look at the pancreas, which is the organ boxed in here. It makes additional digestive enzymes that are released into the small intestine. So its main function is to aid in the process of digestion.